Thanks for coming in today, Chris. I'd just like to ask you a little bit about your approach to assessment and feedback that you've been exploring, I think, for a couple of years now. Could you firstly just tell us a little bit about the approach that you've been using?
I use QuickTime, and I simply make an audio recording in front of the computer. And very often I've got the student work in front of me. If it's an essay, I'm actually reading it, and I can flick through the pages and talk about an individual page or a section of the essay. And if it's practical work, I can watch the video. If it's a piece of film, I'm actually watching it while I'm talking to the student. And it's proved to be very satisfactory from both my point of view and the student's point of view.
You've mentioned that you're using QuickTime, and quite a lot of people would associate that with video, but you're presumably using it just for its audio capability.
Yeah, because it's got an audio recording facility in it, so up comes the little QuickTime bar and you just click on the red button and it's an audio recording. I mean, really, really simple.
Why did you opt for this particular strategy?
Because it's on my computer. It's just so simple.
What do you think the impact on student learning has been?
One student told me when I asked her how she felt about audio recording was, she said, well, I'm not very likely to read the written feedback, but I do listen to the audio feedback. So that's a really, really extreme case. But nevertheless, I think what she's saying is that it's easier in some way. And I think that the feedback that I've gotten, I've got some in front of me, indicates that students really like the detail that comes out in audio feedback, and they can really use that, they can respond to that in their future projects. And importantly, for me, when I give audio feedback, I'm aware that the amount of feedback that I give is much more than I would normally write. So if I write them a couple of paragraphs perhaps, but if I were to transcribe that, my audio feedback, it would be a side of A4 easily, because I'm feeling much more natural about the way I'm talking about their work. And so they get much more out of me in that way. And I'm getting a sense from this feedback that the intonation is really important to them. So I can talk about details of their work, and they're much clearer about what I really mean.
I understand that you've got some specific feedback from students. Could you take us through that, please?
I Facebooked some students prior to doing this video interview to get some feedback from them, because up to now it's all anecdotal and all positive. And so I've got 4 here that responded to me. We're out of term time now, so they didn't all rush back. But it says, hey Chris, I think the audio feedback is really helpful. Much better than reading through a massive essay of feedback. Not that they get a massive essay from me. It's easier to take in as an audio. Another one, I really like the audio feedback. I think it's a lot more personal than written feedback, almost like a one-to-one meeting. I find with written feedback there can be a potential to misinterpret. However, with audio, you can hear the sentiment behind the feedback, whether it be positive or improvement. Third one, I feel that the audio feedback is a helpful tool when receiving marks, as it allows for the student to have a more detailed analysis of the work. It also helps me, being dyslexic, as sometimes when reading, I find it hard to understand the points that are being made. And finally, I find it very productive. It really helps to hear the tone of someone's voice when giving feedback, as you get a better understanding of what they really mean.
Were you comfortable with providing audio feedback from the off, or did it take a bit of practice to get into it?
No, it didn't take me any practice. It just seemed, occasionally I'll redo one, because I'll get lost along the way somewhere and I realise I'm bumbling or something. But for the most part, I find it much easier because I can talk perfectly naturally to the person. And that kind of individual touch, I can say, this is audio feedback for module number, assignment, so-and-so, so-and-so, second mark by so-and-so. And then I can say, okay, Sophie, I've got your essay in front of me. It's looking pretty good overall, but I'm going to bring some points up and I'm going to go straight to page 2 of your essay. And by the way, you really need to put page numbers on, or, those little details. And I know that the intonation can be important, because I could say something like, that's pretty good, or I can say, that is pretty good. And that's got a different meaning, which wouldn't come out in text. So, and I think all those intonations really are very helpful to me to say what I want to about their work.
How do you approach little verbal slips?
Do it again, do it again, do it again,
Yeah.
Unless it was something small enough and I could just say, well, I didn't really mean that, but I do it again, I do it again.
How does this approach work in a practical setting? I presume it needs a reasonably quiet environment. How do you deal with that?
I think it's a problem in a shared space if there are other people talking or the phone goes. I don't really want to be distracted. So I usually do it at home. I could, if the office is quiet, that's no problem. And if something happens, then I can always do it again. Occasionally I've done it in a bar. I've done it. I just do it with a laptop. I can do it anywhere, really.
Overall, do you think this was a successful endeavour?
I have no reason to change it at this point. I'm happy with the technology because of its simplicity. I know the students are happy with the kind of feedback that they're getting. I have no reason to change anything at this point, but I'm open to new discoveries, so maybe.
Are any of your colleagues aware of what you've been doing? And have any expressed an interest to try it too?
No one's taken it up. I'm not being evangelical about it. I'm not telling everybody I think it's a great idea because maybe it only suits some tutors, and other tutors may prefer to feedback in different ways. So I'm sure that if they felt that it was a good way for them personally, they'd already be doing it. Everybody in my department is pretty technically savvy. It's been picked up as good practice by our last external examiner, Professor Poppet, and she's taken it up at University of Leeds and is now using it there. So there's a sense that it's seen as a good thing.
Chris, if I may, I'll just return to the very first question I asked, which was just to give a brief summary of what you've been doing. Could we just once again, or could you, if you wouldn't mind, just once again, describe perhaps a little bit about the module or modules you've been using it with and the kind of work that you receive that you feel is suited to this kind of feedback?
In the first year that I tried it, I only used it for video submissions. And I found that very useful because I could watch the video while I was talking to the student. Fast forward, go back, freeze, talk about certain points. So I sensed that I hadn't experienced the work and then commented afterwards. It was much more of a kind of a live situation. This year, I've tried it with video and with written work. I haven't tried it with presentations or with live performance work yet. And I still give written feedback for presentations and for performance work. I don't know whether I'll go there next year or not. I haven't really thought about it. But for essays, I find it really useful because, again, I've got the artifact in front of me. I can turn the page and I can talk about various sections in the essay and I can flick back. I've no doubt the student can hear the paper rustling and they know it's live, it's really happening. So I find it really useful. I mean, one of the reasons I use it also is for speed, because I find it much quicker to give audio feedback and the student will get much more feedback from me than it would be to write it out. So, perhaps I'm a slow typer and then I have to go back over it and correct what I've written. Whereas if I'm giving audio feedback, I'm sure there's lots of ums and ahs and actually this is what I really mean in it, which are the kind of the equivalent of typos in a way, but it doesn't really matter because it's like a natural conversation. And I have listened back to my feedback to make sure that what I'm saying is coherent and it's going to sound all right to the students, and it does, it sounds fine. There is one comment that's come from other tutors about audio feedback, and that is second marking. And the comment was that it takes them a lot longer to listen to the audio feedback than it does for them to read the written feedback that I would give the student. So, although everything else so far is positive, all of the student feedback is positive, 100% so far, and it works very well for me. And but this particular tutor said it takes him much longer to listen in real time through the audio, and everyone's busy. whereas the written feedback you can go through much more quickly. My strategy is now to, when I look at the work in the beginning, I will make some notes, because I know that he and anybody else who wants them, I can give them the notes to them. They're in rough note form. It's not the way I would give feedback to a student, but it's good enough the tutor knows what's going on. So that is the only downside that I've come across so far.